Jeanette, what's going on? Welcome to the Deep Disc Conversation platform. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. We back in our old stomping grounds.
Yes.
When I was working for the Contributor.
That was at least 5-6 years ago.
I was like 2016 to 2017.
Yeah.
Man, and pandemic years make everything feel longer.
Longer or shorter.
Longer or shorter. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. So let's get straight into it. If you can, just introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and just a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah. My name is Jeanette Opheim. I'm an author and a mom, and that's really where I've just focused my life this past year. I have one children's book out called Annie and Khalil, and then I am working on a novel right now too. So it's my main focus.
No, I'm really excited to talk about like how your journey played a part into the book, in which I was telling you earlier. My son Jameson, we got the book, purchased the book, and he did what toddlers do. Read it, ripped it, read it some more, ripped it up.
It's well loved.
It's well loved. Paperbacks just don't survive with toddlers, and I learned that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Like, this being my first child, I didn't realize like they make like really like child friendly book covers and material where they can chew on it. Rip it, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to last forever.
Not my book.
But you got a hardback out now.
I do, yeah. That just came out, but the page is inside.
But the page is still, the cover is staying.
Yeah.
That's what people see. That's what they care about. Is the cover. So now let's get right into this your journey, your background, and so can you just tell us a little bit about like your community bubble that you grew up in?
So I think the best way to summarize how I was raised was it's based off a question I was asked a couple summers ago by Dr. Tracy Baxley. She's an educator and an author. I'll just highlight her book in a little bit, but I took a class of hers, and she asked, when was the first time you remember having the discussion in your family about what it meant to be a white person in America? And I sat there and I was like, I've never had that conversation.
Right.
That's a luxury as a white person in America we can have, or we don't have to have. And so that kind of summarizes my upbringing. I will use this term probably 10 more times while we talk, but it takes a village to raise a child. So I was raised by my parents, of course, but the village around me, everyone was pretty much white and middle class. I saw no variety outside of that in my neighborhood, in my schools, in my church. It wasn't until 9th grade when I went into high school that I really started to see the world beyond my bubble. So being raised in that capacity, I put my blinders up and just put me in this little comfortable little bubble I floated along in.
Right. And so, in that bubble, so where is this bubble located?
I grew up 45 minutes south of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So it's a county called Charles County in southern Maryland. Yeah.
Okay. Anything that we would know to like kind of
about that area?
Yeah, about the area.
I mean, it's not. It's a diverse area, but it's I mean, I wouldn't describe it as just white or just black, or I mean, there was a lot of culture. The way I was raised, like I watched your interview with Tim Wise and how his mom like had very deliberate social awareness, and she placed her son in an education that like led how it reflected the real world. I just don't think that was the forefront of the village that raised me. They didn't think of that. It was just comfortable.
Right. So when you got into 9th grade, like what blew your mind the most? Like how did your perspective change or start changing?
I learned about life from my peers and from people that weren't raised in the same income level I was, or had a family that looked completely opposite as mine.
Right.
They taught me curse words. Like I didn't even know bad words. I was that, I guess sheltered is a great word for my upbringing. They taught me about life and I loved it. And I was like, oh, this is great. But I still lacked certain awareness. My education, like we grew up going to a slavery plantation for field trips. But when we were there, we didn't learn about, the Holocaust-like conditions that enslaved Africans were subjected to. We were like, how to churn butter and look at this beautiful house that these people from long ago lived in.
Right.
Even Mount Vernon, where George Washington lived, we would go there sometimes. And it's all about George Washington and how wonderful he is and how beautiful his estate was. And then there's just like this very small section dedicated toward the enslaved Africans he had living on his estate. And it's just that vibe, right? That's just the type of education I received. It was all like thing of the past.
Right.
It's all over now.
Right.
Let's focus on the,
So when you was going through this, did you ask questions? Like, were you at the point to be able to start asking questions within like your family and your community village, or were you still kind of just going through the process, just going through the motions?
Going through the motions. I naturally am a type of person that just trusts authority. And so why question what all the people above me who have experienced life are telling me is the way of the world?
Especially if it's like your parents or like really close family members, right? Many of us, especially when we're adolescents, teenage, like we don't tend to question them about things that they may lack perspective on because we don't know, and that's like the authority. Yes,
and it goes back to like my educators, I think, and so therefore my education lacked a lot of awareness. I found an old notebook of mine of history notes from 10th grade and talking about the slave trade and slavery in America. It was very removed from like the tragedy that it was. Just like we talked about slaves coming into America the way we were talking about like tea and sugar, and it was just in my notes, and so I was just like, oh, like in my head at the time I was just like taking notes off the PowerPoint, like this is truth, this is fact. And now being where I am today and looking back and reading those notes and just cringing with every word I read, and just with sadness really that we're raised to ignore that, or I was. And I remember we did a group project in 10th grade, and our group generated a very unfortunate project. It was insensitive. It was stereotypical toward a specific ethnic group, and we got an A. Nothing was said to us about how we could have made it, one, more politically correct, but also just more empathetic toward who we were poking fun at. And I was telling my friend this story, and she had a very similar one, but she had an instructor that was aware of the issues and was able to point out to her how that was, you're playing to stereotypes. Why? Let's work our way backward and approach it differently. And that stuck with her, and she learned from that in group. But like, I don't know. I'm not blaming my education for my lack of awareness, but that could have helped in that moment as a 15-year-old kid.
Well, I think that just says a lot about like how even our schools and the people that's working there, we're all in like this bubble, and it's really challenged if everybody around you thinks the same thing and everybody just going with the flow, right? Sometimes it's intentional, right? We're gonna make sure that we have people that have like the same kind of indoctrination of thinking. Make sure we keep ours together, and then we pass it on to the next generation, and the next generation, and then the next generation, until like somebody eventually leaves and wake up and say, wait a minute now, like these kitchen table talks that we were having were completely kind of wrong, insensitive, racist, maybe discriminatory, and implicit biases, et cetera, et cetera. And so like, and it just goes about what we're talking about, like, in our country, especially in our state of Tennessee, is just like critical race theory and all that. How that is just, no, we're not gonna talk about that. We're gonna get that out of our schools. But that's like an indoctrination of just like white supremacy. And many people grow up in these communities and these schools that just don't change, and they just stay like that. And like, your friend had somebody say, "Oh, wait a minute, let's look at it from a different lens." And some people just like, "No, we're gonna keep this going, and we're gonna give you an A++, right?" Which is so unfortunate. But just imagine how many communities, across the United States are just like doing that, and creating a community of just like people who believe those things, or just think like there's nothing wrong with what's happened, or just continue to carry that indoctrination on.
I was a product of that, I believe, until I became an adult and really started thinking for myself. And
like, let's transition to that. So like, how did that transition happen to where like you started to think for yourself? Because I'm pretty sure there's many people today that are were in your situation growing up, and maybe still haven't learned to think for themselves, or right in the thick of it.
I moved out of my hometown right after college and came down here thinking it would just be like a fun 2-year sabbatical or something, and then go somewhere else. But I ended up, meeting Zach, and here we are today, almost 10 years later. But just being in like, Washington, D.C. is diverse, but I wasn't in the city as an adult. I was there, going on field trips and stuff. So being in a city that was made up of all walks of life was one way that just really like opened my eyes, started to. And then after I met Zach, I was like 24. That's when like he and I really started just processing the world as it is, outside of our bubbles. Like, we had removed ourselves from that village that raised us. And I won't speak to Zach's village, but the village that raised me. And I'm out here. I'm able to like consume information on my terms, not on what I'm told is right or wrong or incorrect or whatnot.
So how did you navigate that? Because I know, like, as it can be difficult to navigate that as like a white woman, and we're trying to learn, and like being completely wrong, but like finding like spaces where you can bravely be wrong and have people teach you because you're willing to learn, and you know like, hey, I'm looking at something different, and I got something wrong, but like, how can I navigate out the situation? Did you have peers? Did you have like friends of color to be able to like, outside of your own kind of research and stuff, kind of like be able to like help you in that brave journey that you was going down?
I would say I hadn't had honest conversations about race or just other people's truths until a little bit later. At the beginning, it was more just, having a friend group that didn't look like me. And, the conversations probably started off pretty superficial and just like, hi, how are you? And like, we're friends. But then, deepening relationships, getting more intentional, and growing from that, and understanding that when it comes to disparity and oppression, I am forever going to be a perpetual student. In that, will I learn things that I need to share? Absolutely. But it's better for me to sit down and listen and learn than to act like I, know everything or tell people they're wrong. I was going to say something. I just spaced. It's okay. Continue.
No. And so, you have a very interesting family dynamic that has led you to a book for your authorship. But also, a lot of people might, white couple adopts a black child, might be a little white saviorism. Who knows? People just have different feelings about that, right? and just the adoption
Yeah.
world in itself, right? A lot of things have been coming out of just over the last years about how that process is and is going. Speak on your journey as a parent in trying to raise kids to be anti-racist and just navigating that because I don't, many people who haven't adopted kids or people who may not know about the adoption process, but also just being like a white family adopting a black kid and then eventually adding another daughter to the family and that whole process. And like I'm gonna get deeper into it, but I want you to just kind of break that down for us.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just like start with how our family was formed. So Zach and I, when we met, adoption was something that came up kind of early on. And you know what, if someone says that's white saviorism, I don't think that's unjustified. But our standpoint was we have a home, we have a heart, we don't feel like closed off to people that aren't biologically related to us. So if there's a need for a child to be adopted, we feel like we are a good family for a child. So that was always something that we had discussed, but then we had a pregnancy loss, and that really was like, we want to be parents. We don't know if we can get pregnant, so let's pursue adoption, which we did. And so our son came into our family through adoption, and he is black. And then shortly after we started the adoption process, we got pregnant. So our daughter came 5 months later. And yeah, we get looks, we get double takes. I don't blame everyone's justified in that. Sometimes I get asked if I'm the kid's nanny. And just like, oh, what's going on here? But
so during that adoption process with your son, what were kind of your like family, your village? What were kind of their takes, and why a black son?
So our family's great about it. I mean, I grew up in a church where there was a lot of adoption. However, it was always narrated to me of like, these kids needed home, kind of what I just spoke to, right? These kids need homes, and this family is open to it, and like, how wonderful, look how beautiful they are. But I never actually talked to those kids, like, what's it like for you as an adoptee, right? Like, how is this for you as a black child in a white family? So I just always had that vantage point of it. And when it came time for when we went through the adoption process, something that came up pretty early on was just, you're going to have to decide what you're open to. And so we were open to it all. But one thing that by it all, we were open to any child, but they made it very clear that if you bring a child of a different race into your family, do you have a community to support them? Like, if you're white and you bring an Asian child into your family, do you have an Asian community that you can immediately immerse them in? And so we have a pretty good black community around us that we felt solid in raising a child with our village, right? Making them that part of our village. And so that's ultimately how we ended up with a black son.
What are some of the initial barriers? Because when I think about that, right, and I think about just the reality of the world that we live in, I can only imagine just like this mentally, just trying to, how do I one, make sure like my black son knows that he's black, and how like and how old is he now? Two. And so he's he's just a kid. They like at some point like it'll be a deeper conversation that y'all have. But as a parent, it's like how thinking about those conversations, thinking about like the realities of the world, and just the different treatment, right? that he will receive and your daughter will receive just based on skin color. Like, how does one process that?
I think about it every day. My son wakes up every day to 3 white people. You know, he's instantly a minority in our house just based on skin color. And so, one, the community, he's around our neighborhood. The moment he steps outside our door, he has peers of all races and kids that look just like him outside. Right. So that, I think, is important for him. Also, the books we have in our house, the artwork we have, what we talk about, the foods we eat. I mean, it's just, I can't give him a traditional Black upbringing. I'm not Black. Right. But giving him as many parts of that as I can. Right. The good news, too, is like we have a relationship with his birth family. So, you know, having the phone calls, talking to them on FaceTime and visiting is important too. I will never be able, nothing about his situation will ever be able to diminish his Blackness and whatever he decides that to be for him. Like, what does it mean for him to be Black? But there are things like with his Black peers he might feel like he missed out on because we're white. And so just knowing I can't give him that, but I can do my best to either provide him with resources or people that can welcome him into that.
Right. Has there been any kind of discrimination against you and Zach as parents, or any just negative treatment once people say, you know what I'm saying? It can be from white or Black folks or, you know, anybody that may not agree with like biracial relationships, cross-cultural adoption. Have you faced any of those barriers and challenges?
Yeah, I mean, there's hateful people out there, especially social media kind of puts you on this public platform that anyone can come to and be like, don't like this, I'm going to let you know that. And I received that a lot at the beginning when my son came into our life. But the moment I switched, because I did have this very much like, I need to educate people on adoption approach on social media, like that was my narrative. The moment I stopped doing that and just, I need to learn and I need to open my ears to adoptees and birth families and listen to their perspectives, I haven't received that type of hateful, you know, attention. And then in public, it's not more so hate, and have I witnessed my son subjected to racial biases already at 2? Yes. But I haven't received like some angry person in public being hateful toward us, but definitely insensitive questions. I mean, it starts from curiosity, and then people can get very bold very fast, and they think this is a kid. I mean, they might not even think that when he's 7 and can totally comprehend everything they're asking, but the questions they ask in front of my kids.
What are some of those questions?
I want to honor my kids and not like just say things that people have said that they can listen to down the road. There's a lot of curiosity around my son's birth family, which is nobody's business. And then like there's also these comments, these very stereotypical comments like, oh, your daughter's so lucky she's going to have a brother that's going to protect her one day. And just like, I don't know, it makes me wonder, like, are you looking at my Black son thinking he's going to be bigger and badder and can protect this small, weak white woman, you know? I don't like that. Honestly, my daughter would probably beat up people for my son if we're basing that on personality. So just, really insensitive conversations. People don't think before they speak, and they let their curiosity lead them.
I think we've all kind of been like guilty of that shock. I know I have. And when I have to check myself. And I think that's what it's about. A lot of times, just checking yourself and just knowing, like, okay, let me check myself on this situation when I see a white kid with a black family, or if it's a black kid with a white family, like it's easy for us because of the world, the country that we live in is so color based, and so we all kind of conditioned to like automatically like antennas. Like, hold on now, wait a minute.
I'm guilty of that
right,
too.
right,
and that's my family.
Yeah. And so what I like about like just like you breaking down your story is one, like it's okay to be honest and just be like, look, I know like I'm thinking wrong, but I can correct it. At least be aware that I need to like reform my thinking. And I hope people that's listening that might witness, a family that is just biracial or bicultural, and like just stop to think like, okay, well, what harm is that doing to me or anybody else? I don't know their situation. Let me make sure I check myself on before I even have the audacity to ask why the family is the way it is, right? But I also like your approach too, that you understand like just because of like what have been done to black folks, that you get it, like, okay, I understand why people, black folks have a reason. People have a reason to be like curious. Like, okay, but like it's still like overstepping at some point to where I feel it's still overstepping to where I don't need to interject into you all's family household because you have a black son, or if you're a black household and have a white daughter. Like I feel like it's, you get into a disrespectful line in my opinion. And like we need to check ourselves on that. Or if you do have thoughts, sometimes keep them to yourself, because you don't know, like you said, the harm that it may not just be causing you, but their child. You don't know how much they can and can't comprehend at 3, 4, 5 years old, and then that might be a whole nother conversation that you have to break down to them once you get home or in the car to explain why did that lady or why did that man make that comment or say that statement.
I mean, I can take the criticism or the questions. I honestly don't mind that. I think opening up discussion around adoption is a good thing.
Right.
It's just when my kids are present and when the questions are just very imposing onto like things no one really needs to know. Like at the end of the day, you can learn about our family without having to ask about my son's birth family, or I hate the question, where did he come from?
Okay.
I think people ask that wanting to say, like, is he from another country originally, or is he from America? And it's just, I don't know. I don't know why people need to know that, really. I mean, I'm happy to share.
Right.
Like, we'll celebrate his heritage, we'll celebrate his ethnicity.
Right.
But the way people ask is just really funny.
You know where that comes from, though? Like, a lot of people... I mean, I didn't learn this until I was able to like travel, right? Because you can easily like, even in, because there's we're a melting pot of people here, right? And so it can be easy for us to say, oh, you know what I'm saying, where did you come from or where are you from? And depending on your background, you can like I'm from the same place. I'm from the United States. And so understanding how to like ask those questions is one thing I figured out when I was like just living abroad, because people didn't think I was from the United States just simply because I was black. Like they just think, I guess, everybody in the United States is white. Is white, but it's like, so where are you from? No, where are your parents from? Like no, where are their parents from? Like I know where you're trying to get to. Like we are from the United States, okay? Like, but it's like it made me realize too, like, okay, well, let me make sure, like, how do I ask people, like, oh, what's your nationality, or where do you call home, and those type of other healthy ways to kind of get to know people without kind of like coming out with like some ignorant out your mouth and kind of like exposing your lack of perspective, and potentially your kind of biases that you already kind of have, and you're kind of showing a little bit by your questioning and trying to figure out like what's going on with my situation. And so
it's like, what do you need to know? And it's this might be a like morbid comparison, but when someone passes away unexpectedly and you see on social media, people are like, how'd they die?
Right.
Like, why do you need to know that?
Right.
Like, what about when you receive that answer, all it is going to do is fuel your curiosity for 2 seconds, and then you're going to move on with your day. Same with, I like the way you said,
right.
where do you call home?
Yeah, yeah. And so you taking, like, you and Zach in general, but you all are taking parenting and mixed it with, like, activism. Right?
Yes. So I mentioned her before, Dr. Tracy Baxley. She teaches on the, I guess her personal philosophy. I love it, though. It's just parenting is a form of activism. How you raise your children is going to affect the world tomorrow.
Right.
And so looking at it, when you stand in your space and you look at the world and, like, so much needs to change, where do I begin, or how can just me make a difference? Really honing in on, I'm a parent. Parenting is a form of activism. We start in the home. So I just love that she's taught on that platform, and I've really just adopted it for our own family and how we raise our kids.
And so how are you making sure, like your upbringing is different for your kids?
The village.
The village.
The village.
How's the village different?
The village is great. I mean, I want my kids to see themselves reflected in our village. I want people that will challenge them, help them grow. Nashville gets tricky. It's very easy to find all white neighborhoods or all black neighborhoods, and it's hard to find. Sometimes it feels like areas, unless you're out like where you and I live, where it's a little bit more spread out, but just like closer to the city, it just feels like so clumpy. Right. So being intentional where we live, making sure I don't want either of my kids to be a minority, and I know that that's wishful thinking.
Right.
And just putting them in an environment where they see themselves represented equally every day is the dream, obviously. So that's what I try to do with our village.
And so, what is some of the personal work, like to combat white supremacy and your own mannerisms and things like that you're doing, often to make sure you can create that village and be intentional about that?
Well, I read a lot, and then so reading anti-racism books or just works from people that highlight different perspectives that I might not be considering when it comes to social issues in this country. And then I try to do at least one education course a quarter that gears toward anti-racism. The educators I really like they're called the Kinswomen on Instagram, and they have a podcast. They do a lot of educational courses, and I've taken a lot with them. Just like, is assimilation violence was one of the topics, and taking a class on that, and just that was a great one for me because I'm like, I need to obviously raise my son, but I don't want to assimilate him either. And so, yeah, trying to just educate myself. And then I recently quit my job, and that has given me a lot of time to dedicate toward causes I care about. So I joined the Nashville Book Connection, which is an organization here in Nashville that it's kind of like the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, where the goal is to expand literacy and build children's libraries at home through handing out free books. But they really focus on doing that in the public school system in Nashville. So right now we hand out books at Warner Magnet School, the elementary school in East Nashville. And it's so great because all those books, the kids come out and they see themselves on those bookshelves, which is so important. And they pick whatever book they want. And sure, some of them gravitate toward, the Disney princess books, like it's a winner every time. But it's amazing to see what the kids will grab. Either books where, a lot of the time it's books where the characters look like themselves, but sometimes too, it's like there's this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy that chose the book The Proudest Blue. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's about the practice of wearing hijab.
Okay.
And I just loved that.
Right.
I'm like, you're just expanding your views, and putting that book on your bookshelf is so important.
Do you, have you been able to help other white colleagues or peers of yours navigate white supremacy or racism in their journey, like using your experience, or just recognize like, hey, let's talk about that. Are you that friend? Like, or just, or another parent or something like, hey, like let me talk to you about this and how this maybe could be like harmful in some type of way.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I feel like my DMs sometimes are just a little mini therapy session for like weepy white women who are just like trying to process it in their own time, which I'm grateful to help them, but I'm not an expert. And I've also seen myself, when I apply anti-racism practices to life, in like real life, my performative allyship on my Instagram account dwindles, because I'm not doing virtue signaling, like, look how great of a white person I am. I'm more just, it's like, it's not about that. It's not about who follows me to see like she's a good white person, It's more focusing on applying what I'm taking into the real world and actually making a difference and actually making a change. Obviously having conversations about that is something I do often. I have a anti-racism accountability partner. She's a friend of mine, but she lives far away from here. But we Zoom once a month, and we challenge each other. We talk about things that have come up in our day-to-day life. And it's great. It's a great relationship to have.
That needs, everybody needs one of those.
Yeah.
like for real, because we all, I feel like no matter where you are on the spectrum, no matter what color you are, your nationality, ethnicity, if you're here in the United States, you're affected by white supremacy, right? And we all have to check ourselves and check each other sometimes. And having that accountability partner, is amazing. And I guess like I have one of those. Like my cousin is that for me, and it's a little different, right? But it's like making sure like when I'm not projecting like self-hate. Right, as a black man, making sure that when I see another black man, like I'm not feeling threatened by him because he looks like me, and not letting like conditioning and this indoctrination like affect like that moment, and just trying to show like just give off the energy of love, but also show love, and making that a practice. And so that's like my accountability. It's just one thing I'm checking myself on, but also like it's something like my cousin is like, hey man, we gotta do better with that. Like we should be able to say what's up to each other without it being some tension, or just because we look like, we look like each other, like, and therefore like, oh, if I see myself as a threat, and I feel, just working that out. And so, no, I like that though. And I would encourage everybody getting accountability. What did you call it again?
She's the anti-racism accountability
Anti-racism, anti-white supremacy accountability partner.
Yep.
Like, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like a club right there.
It is a club. If anyone wants to join, come on. We got Zoom calls once a month.
Yeah, hey, sign up for that.
Yeah.
I might just get on that.
You're welcome to join.
Yeah, no, for real. Seriously. So, I want to get into the book.
Yeah.
I want to get into the book. And I encourage everybody to get the book. Let's talk about how your journey and your kids, are both represented in this book.
Yeah. So based on these ignorant topics and questions we get thrown at us often, insensitive, I should say, or very overly curious. I was just like, there will be a day when I'm not around to explain the nature of their relationship, and they're going to have to voice that themselves in a way that establishes boundaries, but isn't, like either super passive aggressive or too opening, where they feel like they owe people the answer to things that they can keep to themselves. So it's like, you'll appreciate this. They slept in one day early on, and it was probably before the pandemic actually, but they slept in for a very long time. I'm like, what am I going to do with all this free time? So I sat down and like knocked this book out on my phone and shared it with a couple people. And I was like, I think I can make this a book. So I did. And I always talk about the fact that it is meant for children in multiracial sibling dynamics to navigate conversations they'll get thrown at, or that will get thrown at them. However, it's for everyone, because you want to build empathy within your children. So adding a book to your bookshelf where that might not reflect your personal circumstances, but it'll still help your kid learn, like, hey, there will be these types of siblings one day.
No, I look at your book, it's an anti-racist book. Like, that's how I looked at it, as far as, like, even though it doesn't reflect my household, or the household I grew up in, like, I know, like, that exists, right? And I want to raise a son that knows it exists too, and when they come to age and mature, like, they don't see that as something that's, like, abnormal, something they're confused or, like, be ignorant to, and then ask, like, this, insensitive questions and things like that. But, like, no, like, oh no, I had a book my dad and my mom read to me that talked about like how a brother and sister could, be two different colors and still be brother and sister and grow up and be family. And that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. And just let that be and go on, and we can all play together, right? And so I'm sure there's other editions coming soon, but, like, I really appreciate just how you took your journey and took your growth, and we're all still learning and growing, right? And, like, and really put it in a book, and for people, like, to conceptualize and invite into their home and, reflect on that. And I would encourage everybody to check it out, especially if you're a parent, though. And reflect on, if you wouldn't read this book, why not? If you wouldn't put this in your home, why wouldn't you? Right? And maybe that means you have some work you need to do. And so, what has the feedback been like about on the book?
I haven't gotten any negative feedback yet. It's been very either like, I love this book because my family looks just like yours and this is great for my kids, or it's just like, friends who wanted to support me that are bringing the book into their home and then sharing the word. And and I don't say I haven't gotten any bad feedback yet to sound cocky about it. I'm just surprised, because when you put out something that touches on race, even just a little bit in a mild way that I do in my children's book, I get nervous that people will get up in arms about it in their own way. So,
and people tend, when the kids are involved, people tend to be more, like, sensitive about. Don't mean it ain't some people like that just don't care, but it tend to be more sensitive. But I think you not getting any negative feedback yet, because it might happen.
It will. I gotta be open to it.
Yeah, but I think it's also kind of, I guess, be optimistic about the shift in people's thinking in this country too, right? You can. It might be a reach, but, like, I would look at it as like, okay, like, people are, kind of waking up more to understand, like, this is okay, and this can work. And what that book did for me is, it made me think about, like, did I have any other book like this, like, in my home? And I didn't. I didn't. I had, like, different, like, cultural books, but I didn't have any books that mixed them all, like, mixed it together, like black and white specifically, right? I didn't have any books like that. It did intentionally make sure they had a primary, like, black character and a primary white character, right? Didn't have any, right? And so it made me think on, like, well, I wonder, like, are there a lot of books like this that are intentional about, like making sure, like, expressing, because you're very, like, it's very, like, kind of, like, intentional about expressing, like, the togetherness and, like, it's okay about, like, like, my brother's, like, black, my sister's white.
I haven't found any explicitly close to mine, but there are books about adoption out there, and
Right.
They're not my favorite.
But like that's the thing. Like I don't. It doesn't like because I know you personally. Like I know like that's where it comes from. But it doesn't. Like I get way more than that than for me personally when I read the book.
Well, I appreciate you saying
Than
that.
just adoption, right?
Yeah.
Like because that's not really the focal point like in the text, right? It's not like you spilling that out, right? And so like but it's like it's the really underlining but also like on the surface kind of conversations and in relationship that the brother and sister is having in the book.
Yeah.
They're really like they're really to me. That's why they really to me it really makes it like how to be an anti-racist like kind of parent in a way, but just in a different way.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. I did not make adoption the focal point, and it can be for kids that are in the foster care system too that might share a home with someone that doesn't look like them or.
Yeah.
I mean, families are composed in wild ways.
Right,
so that's based on my story, but it's still
But your story
reflective.
is probably a lot of other people's story, right?
Yeah.
And like you took the initiative to be brave and put that out there in a book. And I think I know Zach is proud, I know your family's proud, but your kids are going to be proud. Like
I hope so.
I think they're going to be proud. And then and so I really appreciate you for that growth. And this platform is all about like building community, right? And I actually just had a cousin, older cousin that adopted, I think 2 kids, but they're both black. But other than that, I haven't been like experienced or like into the adoption process or knew anybody that especially did did adoption was I know Will Acuff. I do know Will Acuff. He did adopt a black son as well with a disability. Y'all check out that episode. It's crazy. But I didn't really know anybody like that. And again, I had my own like biases just growing up. Like I don't know how I feel about like white people adopting like black kids. And then because you hear all these things like these horror stories, but also just like what is that coming out of? Like,
well, those
intentions?
are important to consider though. Those horror stories, I mean, it's very easy for a white person to be ignorant and stay in that ignorance bubble.
Right.
There isn't anything challenging us.
Right.
It's just that's how this country was formed for white people to be comfortable.
Right.
And so I think those horror stories happen more often than we know of, and it's a tragedy. And I think that's why if you do plan, it's to adopt transracially, which is the term used for another race coming into a family of a different race. Transracial adoption, to just really be mindful of like the environment you're about to put your kid in. And I speak from this not as like I know how to do it right. I'm still learning. I was learning from the moment we considered adoption, and I'm going to learn for the rest of my life. My hope though is just that I can provide my son with a really healthy environment where he can look back on one day and be like, I don't know. I'll let him decide.
But also like your daughter too.
Yep, my daughter.
Because like that's gonna change the dynamic of maybe how people see and treat her in this country, in this world. Like, oh, you gotta, and so and so I know there's gonna be conversations on both sides, different conversations, but like conversations for sure. And you just want to make sure they're prepared and protected.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I have it's kind of off topic, but a statistic. It's kind of devastating about the diversity in children's books in America. I have to read this off because it's long. So this study was done by the Cooperative Children's Book Center, School of Education, University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's a mouthful, and this was based in 2018. So hopefully we've seen these percentages level out just a little bit, but out of all the children's books in America, 50% of them contain white characters.
Wow.
Then 27% of them were animals, and then 10% African or African American, and then other ethnicities dwindle from there.
Animals.
But so isn't that to know
Golly.
that our sons are more likely to open up a book with an animal in it as a main character than their own self is devastating to me.
is.
And I never want to write a book where I contribute explicitly to that white percentage, but I also understand that by making books with main characters that are not of my own race,
Right.
one, I need to be mindful of it. There's this great resource out there called sensitivity editors. Like if I wrote a book about a black character, I'm not black, so I can't write from my experiences.
Right.
They'll come in and, from their viewpoint as a black person, edit your book for you. It's amazing.
When, like, one, I just really appreciate you, because just being that intentional and mindful when we know people don't and maybe don't have to because it's white privilege, right? And so I really like, and I'm learning about these things too as we're talking about it. Like, I didn't know there were resources like that. But you just have an intentionality to making sure that you're being sensitive and knowing, like, okay, like, I know my white privilege. Let me make sure that, like, I do this in the right, respectful way. If there is one, let me try to find it.
Yeah, it's a great resource. And I mean, it makes me as a writer look better. So I
Right.
just owe it to them. But
Right.
also writing books like that, knowing that I might be taking up space of a BIPOC author who is also writing from the same
Right.
position. So it's like this fine line to walk, like not contributing to just an all-white book cast, or
Right.
there's like that token black person in the book
Right.
that people throw in just to say their cast is diverse.
Right.
So not doing that, but also not taking up space where other people might deserve to have a bigger platform.
Right.
So the way I've looked at it is, you know, if I promote my book, for every one book I promote of my own,
Right.
boost up 3 books of or more of other authors that are different race than me.
Right. All right. So yeah, let's end on this. Let's close out. So you brought some books.
I know. Here I am. I look like a
and
librarian.
So let's share them.
Can you see me? So this one's a kid's book about racism. You can't find it on like Amazon. You have to go to their website. It's called A Kid's Book About, I believe, .com. Yep, akidsbookabout.com. This one, if you're a white parent and you don't know how to introduce the topic of race, I think this is a great one to use. And then for parents with black children or any children that would be discriminated against based on their race, it's a great book to just start a conversation with.
Okay.
They recommend 6 years old, but I've had educators tell me to actually introduce this kid to your children when they're a little bit younger.
Okay.
This book, sorry, I think I called it. So this one is Come Meet Drayden. So this is written by Dana Young Askew. I interviewed her for my Candid Convos with Authors. She's a wonderful friend of mine and just a wonderful human. And so she wrote a book about her son who has autism. So I think that one's a great one you guys should check out. I've talked about her a couple times in this interview, Dr. Tracy Baxley. She just came out with this book. It's called Social Justice Parenting.
Okay.
I haven't started it yet. I read books very sporadically, but I follow her on Instagram and I believe everything she talks about. So I think that's a great one for parents to read. And then I talked about sensitivity editors.
Right.
Elizabeth Stevens is someone I've been consulting with. So this is her novel, The Hunting Town, and she actually has a couple books out. If you're into fantasy or sci-fi, she writes a whole bunch of that type of stuff. So
Wow.
those are
No.
books I recommend.
No. This is awesome, and you just gave me a couple ideas that I think that I would like. We're gonna talk about once we finish. But Jeanette, I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
No, like you dropped a lot of knowledge like I was just unaware of. Like and I hope like the listeners and the watchers, one, check out these books as they apply or don't apply to you or whatever. But check them out, refer them to other people they may apply to. But also like do the work, like be intentional. Like Jeanette has been able to be intentional and still knowing like you're growing and you're learning every day. And it's not something you can just be perfect at, right? And so, no, I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you for doing this. This is wonderful.
No. And of course, I appreciate everybody that's listening and watching. But thank you. Until next time, bringing you back.
Bye.
All right, see y'all later.